My fiancée helped her sister keep an affair hidden from her husband, so I ended our engagement. However, she wouldn't accept my decision and finally disclosed a deep secret. Just yesterday, I overheard a conversation between my fiancée Sarah and my brother-in-law Marty, which made me suspect that Sarah was assisting her sister Evelyn in concealing her affair from Marty. I tried to dismiss what I overheard as just a coincidence, but I couldn't let it go. That evening, I felt compelled to check Sarah's phone. I took it, locked myself in the bathroom, and unlocked the phone. That's when I discovered that Sarah's sister Evelyn had been cheating for about 6 months with a colleague, and Sarah had been helping her hide it nearly the whole time. There were hundreds of messages between them about the affair, the colleague, private details, and even humiliating comments about my brother-in-law, like making fun of his private parts, which really upset me. I took screenshots of the messages, then put the phone back where it was. The next morning, I decided to skip work and visit Marty to tell him everything. I arrived at his place just after 10 a.m. He had just put his daughter to sleep, and we had a tough, long discussion in the kitchen. He had been suspecting the affair for a while, but Evelyn, with help from Sarah and some friends, managed to hide it well. I didn't have all 6 months of messages, just some screenshots I sent to myself from Sarah's phone, but I showed them to him and offered to help any way I could. I work in field analysis for an insurance company specializing in fraud, so I have some useful skills and contacts. I knew I had to confront Sarah that evening and start telling our friends and family, now confident that it wouldn't hurt Marty. Marty wanted help identifying the man Evelyn was seeing. The first thing I did was look through Evelyn's LinkedIn connections, but found nothing. Marty mentioned that Evelyn was going out for drinks after work and wouldn't be home until around 10 p.m. He didn't need to explain his suspicions, as I understood immediately. I agreed to help, but insisted he come with me. Then, I called my friend Mark, briefed him on the situation, and he agreed to meet us later. We first drove to Marty's parents' place to have them watch their granddaughter. I stayed in the car while Marty talked to them. Afterward, we headed to Evelyn's workplace. We located Evelyn's car and used a spare key. Marty had to unlock it. I gave Marty a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to put in the car. After setting it up, we parked nearby and waited for my friend to arrive and for Evelyn to leave her office. My friend Mark arrived about 20 minutes later, joined us in the car, and an hour later, Evelyn left her office with 2 female friends and a younger, sandy-haired man, holding hands. It was obvious they were together. I snapped a few photos from the car and followed her as she drove away. Initially, I thought she might head straight to a hotel, but instead, she went to a nice bar and grill and parked on Earth Street. I drove past her as she entered the bar and then parked nearby to plan our next steps. We sent Mark in first because he was unknown to them. His tasks were to try to capture compromising photos of Evelyn and the man, named Jake, and to act as my alibi. Marty and I waited in the car until Mark sent the first photos of Evelyn and Jake being intimate in front of their coworkers. Marty's suspicions were confirmed. Their coworkers were also helping hide the affair from Marty. He was very hurt and angry. One of the coworkers is married and close friends with both Marty and Evelyn. I asked Marty if he had seen enough, but he desperately wanted to know who the man was. I suggested finding out later, but he insisted. So I texted Mark that I was coming and went into the bar myself. As I walked in, I saw Evelyn and her group laughing and drinking. I acted surprised to see her and called out to her. She was visibly shocked to see me, and the tension among her friends was immediate. Evelyn quickly introduced me as her sister's fiancée and mentioned our upcoming wedding. Everyone congratulated us. I shook hands with the blonde man and introduced myself, hoping he'd give his name, which he did. I introduced myself to the others and then excused myself, saying I was meeting a coworker. I waved to Mark and moved over to him. We quickly searched online and found out the man's details. We found his social media and some legal records. It turns out the man, Jake, is 26 and married. Things just kept getting more complicated. I texted Marty the man's name and decided to see what else would unfold, staying at the bar a bit longer. I made sure I was visible to Evelyn and her group. They were clearly uncomfortable with my presence, which I felt was beneficial. After about 10 minutes, I had Marty text Evelyn that he would stay overnight at his parents' with their daughter. Soon after, Evelyn showed her phone to Jake, and they all decided to leave. Evelyn came over to say goodnight and invited Sarah and me to dinner over the weekend. I smiled and agreed, saying it was a great idea, and wished them a good night. Mark and I settled our bill and returned to Marty, who was waiting. I half expected Evelyn to head to a hotel, but it turned out she was just going for drinks that night. When Marty texted her about staying at his parents', it changed her plans. We followed her home, staying out of sight. Shortly after, another car arrived, and Jake got out and entered Evelyn's house. They went inside together. By then, it was about 7:30 p.m., and I had my own plans for the evening, but I felt I had done enough to help Marty. He could handle the rest. Update 2. When I got home, I was ready to call off the wedding and found Evelyn crying on the couch with Sarah. I paused, almost leaving, but then entered the room. Both Sarah and Evelyn looked up, but didn't accuse me of anything. I just looked back, silently asking what was happening. The moment passed, and Evelyn continued crying, with Sarah comforting her, as if Marty hadn't told them about my role in uncovering the affair. I pretended not to know anything, mainly to see Sarah's reaction. I sat down and casually asked what was going on. Evelyn kept crying, and Sarah then told me Marty was divorcing Evelyn. I acted as though I was just finding this out. I pressed on with the obvious question. Why? I asked Sarah. She stopped comforting Evelyn for a moment and looked at me. Sarah's expression changed, and Evelyn gave her a meaningful look. There was a pause before Sarah finally admitted Evelyn cheated on him. This caught me off guard. Evelyn seemed upset by her sister's words. She slumped further into the couch, mixing a sigh with a sob. I hesitated a moment, then asked Sarah directly, "Did you know about this?" Sarah stayed silent. She simply nodded, continuing to rub her sister's shoulder. I asked how long it had been going on. Sarah replied more easily than I expected. 6 months. Her easy admission surprised me, and Evelyn seemed just as shocked. Evelyn pushed her sister's hand away, and even Sarah seemed startled by her own admission. I leaned back, knowing it was time to reveal everything. "We're not getting married." The sisters looked shocked, and both said, "Huh? What?" I stood up and clarified. "We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who hides such things, especially for 6 months." Sarah stood up, seemingly in disbelief. Her body language screamed, "Are you serious?" But I firmly stated, "I'm serious. This doesn't sit right with me. I don't like this at all. I can't marry you feeling like this. It would be wrong." Sarah immediately started crying loudly, making emotional appeals about love, lost money, inconvenience to friends, and the shame it would cause. This was all stuff I had considered, but hearing it from Sarah, sobbing heavily, made it hit harder. At that moment, I probably made a mistake by saying, "Look, I've already canceled the honeymoon. It's over." I realized immediately that this statement would cause an uproar, and it did. Evelyn, usually quite composed, was quick to figure things out, which must be why she managed to deceive her husband for so long. When she realized what was happening, especially after seeing me at the bar, it all clicked for her. She yelled at me angrily and charged across the room. I'm not particularly big, but I'm not weak either. Yet, Evelyn's attack nearly knocked me over, and I barely managed to defend myself as she started clawing at my face. I nearly dropped my phone during the struggle, but I managed to push her off and yelled loudly, "Evelyn, stop. Sarah, get her under control." Evelyn tried to attack me again, but Sarah did what I asked and grabbed Evelyn, holding her back. I warned Evelyn that I'd call the police if she didn't leave, showing my phone to make my point clear. Sarah tried to calm things down, explaining that Evelyn had nowhere to go because Marty had taken her car keys, but I was done with Evelyn and made that clear. I went to my office, locked myself in, and called the police. I reported to the police that my fiancée's sister had attacked me and that I had locked myself in my office, fearing for my safety. I even mentioned that I recorded the whole incident on my phone. Just as I was finishing, Sarah knocked on the door. "Please come out. We need to talk," she said. "I love you. Don't do this," she pleaded. "Evelyn is sorry." She also claimed Evelyn wanted to apologize. I doubted that, seeing how desperate Sarah seemed. I didn't respond, and soon the police arrived. I heard Sarah talking to the police, and I decided to come out. The officers were 2 men, one younger, about Sarah's age, and the other older and more world-wearied. I introduced myself, pointed out Evelyn as my attacker, and offered to show the police the video. The younger officer asked if I wanted to press charges, and I confirmed that I did. He repeated the question, and I confirmed again. The officers exchanged looks, and before the younger one could ask again, I insisted on pressing charges. I argued that I had video proof and this needed to go to court, or else I'd escalate it to their supervisor. I was quite upset, but I stood firm because the facts were clear. Yes, I wasn't physically injured, but Evelyn had attacked me in my home, and I wanted her removed. Luckily, the situation didn't get worse, and the officers handcuffed Evelyn and took her to their car. She was very upset, crying and making a scene. Sarah was also distressed, repeatedly pleading and saying no, please no. Eventually, the younger officer checked in again to see if everything was all right. I simply said I was going to bed. He asked Sarah the same, and when she hesitated, he pressed further, clearly looking for something more. Sarah eventually acknowledged him, but the officer wasn't satisfied and continued probing. I intervened, warning him about my doorbell camera recording. I pushed my luck with the officer, but his partner eventually intervened and pulled him away before things escalated further. The older officer, likely not wanting to deal with a complicated situation at the start of his shift, seemed to convince the younger one to leave it be. They left with Evelyn, hopefully ending that chapter of my life. The following day turned out to be incredibly strange. When I woke up, Sarah was still at the house and had cleaned everything. She stayed at a distance but seemed like she wanted to talk. I told her we needed to finish our conversation. She sat next to me, and though I considered moving away, I didn't. We weren't going to marry, but I didn't hate her. I was deeply disappointed by her actions, especially her texts about Marty, but we were both suffering, and I didn't want to worsen things. It took more talking for Sarah to really accept that the wedding was off. She was very emotional. At one point, she was almost hyperventilating. Then she asked, "What about us?" Honestly, I didn't have an answer. I told her I didn't know. I explained that the texts I read showed me a side of her I didn't recognize, and I was unsure about us. I couldn't understand why she supported Evelyn's derogatory comments and infidelity. She kept saying she knew it was wrong. I asked for an explanation, but she couldn't give one. She admitted she got swept up in supporting her sister. I argued that a good sister would keep you honest, not encourage bad behavior. She agreed and admitted she always followed Evelyn's lead since they were kids. Then Sarah surprised me again, claiming it was unfair because I had been messaging another woman last year. "What's unfair?" I asked. "You were messaging Mandy last year, but I got over it," she accused. Confused, I asked who Mandy was. Sarah accused me of having a mental breakdown and insisted she saw messages last year but chose not to confront me since I stopped them. She claimed to have checked my social media on my computer while I was at work, which should have shown nothing as it's mostly family and work friends. I offered her to check again, but she called me names and started throwing things. I warned her if she didn't stop, she'd be removed like her sister. She cursed and stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door. Confused, I went to my office to search online for "stupid wife Mandy." I found various social media profiles for a Mandy, including a very exaggerated profile picture of a woman from Australia. Last Christmas, my brother, who was visiting from Australia, used my computer for online activities after everyone else was asleep. I had allowed him to use my computer whenever he had jet lag. It appears he logged into sites and possibly interacted with this Mandy. What a situation. Update 3. I began the task of informing all my wedding guests about the cancellation, starting with my side of the family and friends. Calling everyone took the entire evening. After I finished, I sat down, unsure when Sarah had left, and pondered how to handle my brother Carl's actions. Carl and I are close, despite our age difference. I've always respected him, especially for how he looked after me as a kid. Learning he might have been unfaithful in my house was hard to process, and I needed to decide how to approach it. Confronting him seemed necessary, but with my own relationship crumbling, I questioned the value of exposing him just to clear my name. I felt I had to at least confront him to urge him to stop, but I wasn't sure if I'd tell his wife, Karen. What he told me next would influence my decision. I video called Carl on Facebook, and after some initial small talk, I bluntly asked if he had been chatting with women online using my computer. Carl looked startled and quickly shut his office door. "Yes, I did." "Why?" he admitted. I explained how Sarah mistook his actions for mine, expressing my frustration at being blamed for his behavior. I directly asked if his wife Karen knew about this. Carl hesitated, then admitted she didn't know and he'd prefer to keep it that way. He explained they had been struggling in their marriage, particularly with intimacy since their youngest child was born. Carl was usually private about such matters. He openly discussed how tough things had been and how often he faced rejection at home. Despite his efforts at home, Karen was consistently tired, which led to issues in their relationship side, a sort of performance anxiety. Whenever Karen felt up for intimacy, things didn't go well. Making matters worse, Carl said, no matter how much housework he did or how much he took care of the kids, it never improved their intimate life. So, he started spending more time working in his office at night. He mentioned this with air quotes, indicating his working often involved visiting OnlyFans sites, a habit that escalated due to the privacy his office provided. I asked him if he was still visiting those sites, and he insisted he had stopped. I wanted to believe him because he seemed honest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The dilemma I faced was tricky. To clear my name, I needed Carl to admit it was him to Sarah. But if he did, Sarah might spitefully tell his wife, Karen. I felt Karen should know, yet I hesitated to possibly ruin their marriage over something Carl claimed he had stopped, which put me in a moral dilemma. I suggested to Carl that he should tell his wife and consider marriage counseling. He revealed they had been in counseling for 6 months, and what really helped was a prescription for a medication that helped with his anxiety about intimacy. He explained that they were now trying to ensure regular intimacy, and the medication had really helped, making them look forward to their time together. He begged me not to mess things up now that their relationship was improving. I didn't want to disrupt their healing relationship, especially not for my niece's sake. If Carl was telling the truth, I'd be risking a lot. I plan to meet him soon and hope to clarify things over a few drinks. It seemed the wisest approach. That night, I went to bed early and didn't see Sarah until the next morning. She looked very worn out, as if she hadn't slept well. I asked her where she had been, more out of routine since we had been together so long. She said she went to the courthouse to post bail for Evelyn, then took her to her parents' house to stay. She also mentioned how hard it was to explain to her parents that I had called off the wedding. I asked if her parents knew why, and she sharply replied that they did. I tried to stay calm, but I snapped and asked if she was planning to move back with her parents. It was a petty reaction because her helping Evelyn annoyed me deeply. "You don't need to act this way," she said. I retorted, "And you don't need to follow Evelyn's lead." That comment clearly hurt her, and she began to tear up, making me regret my temper. We stood in silence for a while before Sarah said our parents were coming over at 3. I was frustrated she hadn't consulted me. I nearly lost my temper again but realized it was just my ego. We needed to discuss the wedding cancellations and the deposits with our parents face to face. The next few hours were tough. My parents gave some support, but it was a strained situation for everyone. We managed to agree on how to handle the wedding finances, trying to recoup and split what we could. But when discussing the house, Sarah strongly opposed my suggestion to repay her or her parents for their part of the deposit. She insisted on not moving out. We hadn't thoroughly discussed our living arrangements post-breakup, and bringing it up in front of her parents clearly upset her. She became very upset, which made me realize I should have clarified our relationship status more clearly before discussing financial matters. It made it obvious how I felt about our relationship's future. Although our parents might have suspected the breakup, Sarah was not ready to accept it. She stated firmly that she wasn't leaving our home and we weren't breaking up. That's how our difficult day ended. After everyone left, Sarah and I tried to discuss things further but kept going in circles. I was exhausted and just wanted some peace. We ended up sitting together quietly, watching a movie until bedtime. We agreed to talk more the next day and went to our separate rooms. The next morning, I found a long letter from Sarah under my door. I glanced at the first few pages, deciding to read it fully later, and went to work. When I left, Sarah was still asleep, likely exhausted from writing the letter. At work, I began contacting our wedding vendors to handle cancellations. Throughout the day, as I worked, I read Sarah's letter. It was a heartfelt 20-page letter explaining how she felt pressured by Evelyn to support the affair and her difficulty in saying no due to her tendency to please others. Reflecting on this, I realized that Sarah had always been too agreeable, never challenging my plans or decisions, always striving to be the perfect girlfriend, which made her seem more like a yes woman in our relationship. We had never argued in 6 years, which seemed perfect until it wasn't. This realization made me see Sarah's deep insecurities and her need to make everyone happy, which isn't healthy for a real relationship. This perspective made me understand that I didn't really know the real Sarah. She had always reflected what she thought I wanted to see. The person in those texts might just be another side influenced by Evelyn, not the real Sarah either. It felt like our relationship was one-sided, with her loving me for being open and expressive, but me loving the image she projected. We discussed this issue in depth that night, realizing she needed professional help. Sarah's fear of displeasing people was damaging our relationship. Ending the wedding was undoubtedly the right decision, giving me confidence in my choice. After our discussion, I went to sleep feeling less troubled than I had in days.